Having realized the value of communication, it becomes essential to teach communication skills. In the process of teaching communication skills, probably various schools of medicine has developed their own approaches in teaching communication skills. All of them are probably had been effective, but then various models of communication has evolved. It's such an important aspect of your life, and teachers will engage in teaching communication skills, will promote a model of communication. Various models had their own emphasis in the process of communication. So we try to look at various aspects of various models of communication just to get a basic understanding about what a model of communication is. Before starting the subject, just to remind the definition of communication, remember that I have defined that in my previous lecture. Communication as a process of sharing, stress the word sharing, information, ideas, feelings, emotions and values between two or more persons. Now that is important. It's not only the information but also ideas, feelings, emotions and values between two or more persons. And then I have stressed about the fact that we need to be supportive, effective and efficient in the process of communication. Now efficiency becomes very important, but not to compromise its effectiveness and supportiveness. So that's how you become a professional in the process of communication. What is patient-centeredness? Now this term is very popular. Now say client-centered care, customer-centered care, customer-centered service, student-centered service. Likewise, we try to focus our attention towards our client. Now the patient-centeredness is similar. So here, if you are to give a comprehensive definition, is considering the patient as a whole human being within the family and the society, and collaboratively planning and providing care. Now, the patient is a whole person. It's not that he has a organ system or a hand or a leg that is ill, that is not functioning properly. He's a total person, and not only just a whole human being. He's within a family and the society. So therefore he has responsibilities, he has emotions, feelings, attachments, and a lot of other things involve that person. So that's the patient-centered care, where you take into consideration all these multitude of complexities in his life. And not only the fact that you consider them, but also you collaboratively get engaged with the person, your client, the patient, in deciding, planning the care. So that is very important in this process of providing care. Now, underneath you can see towards realistic medicine. Now there is current thinking, current perception about this patient-centered care, whether patients who do not really understand the implication of certain disease processes, they might engage in unnecessary interventions, and when they suggest, they are not professionals, they don't know. So therefore, whether we should be guiding them to some extent. That is, people talk about realistic medicine. I think first thing is we need to be patient-centered, but then the realistic medicine is an extension of the patient-centeredness. Realistic medicine does not denote or support doctor-centered care or disease-centered care. Now we'll try to look at models of communication. First, look at the evolution of models of communication. This model is called transmission model of communication. It is unidirectional. You have a sender and a receiver. The receiver has to listen to whatever the sender says and whatever the message he gets. The receiver has no control over the process. Shannon-Weber model of communication is developed by these telecommunication engineers, 1949. One of the main point that was stressed is, and you have a sender, and then you have a receiver, and they talk about a source, and then receiving, and then they were talking in terms of possible disturbances, noises that can creep into the process of communication. and then they inserted this feedback loop as well into the model of communication. However, it is a process of giving and taking, giving and taking. You take turns like in a telephone conversation, and people have found that this is an artificial model, and the natural communication does not take turns to communicate, and we like to continue in engagement of communication. So the interactive model of communication, you have a receiver and a sender, but then you take turns and you give the message and you receive the message and you take turns and communicate with each other. So that is what is called interactive model of communication. Transaction model of communication recognize the fact that we are constantly communicating. In fact, what they say is that it's not possible for us to not to communicate at any moment of time. When you are silent, you are communicating. When you are talking, you are communicating. When you show your anger, you are communicating. So all the time we are communicating. So transaction model recognize that it's a constant process of communication. It's not a matter of taking turns and communicating with each other. So this is what is really happening in our real life communication, especially when we are dealing with our emotional, our predicaments, our issues in our life. In fact, what we have been discussing or presenting to you is the models that have developed in Western countries, but I'm sure in our own countries, in our local setting, there are rich communication models taking place in our villages, our natural setting. So probably we need to explore those good skills, and I think we all have those. Being respectful, we have a process of starting conversation, ending conversation, and various other good qualities. So we need to explore those things and understand the fact that we also do have our communication models. In fact, these models, we should get him involved in the process of managing and planning treatment. This slide presents a long list of models of communications. You can see various models have different intentions or the approaches. Now, whether they want to be patient-centered or doctor-centered in this horizontal angle. And then in the vertical angle, whether you are task-oriented or behavior-oriented. Probably you need to get some literature and read about this in more detail. And the common model that we are talking about is very much the medical model that we are practicing currently is very much doctor-centered and task-oriented. What is the task? Task is to arriving at a diagnosis and listing problems. Doctor-centered because doctor decide what questions to ask and what responses they like, and then decide on what information to share. So that is more like doctor-centered. And there are several models you have various names, Scott and Davis, Bryan and Long, and triaxial model. And then there are more patient-centered models. Now, narrative medicine, non-directive counseling, Bellint approach. Likewise, there are many very much patient-centered, behavior-oriented. There's no real task, it's just behavior-oriented. In non-directive counseling and narrative medicine, that is what is happening. And then the Calgary-Cambridge model that we are trying to promote is more like task-oriented, where you would like to arrive at a diagnosis rather than just soothing the patient or adapting the behaviors of the patient. It's a balanced, patient-centered and doctor-centered approach. I just want to get into some of the educational principles as well in this lecture. Now, what we are doing currently in this lecture series is just giving some understanding and knowledge about communication skills. And it is vital that for you to have a better understanding about it by reading process and discussions and try to apply that knowledge. And then not only that, you need not stop just applying, but also you need to analyze and synthesize new things and then evaluate the process of communication by yourself, so that by doing that, you can be an expert on communication and communication skills in healthcare. In the process of learning communication skill, I invite you to think of beyond factual knowledge that you gather. Now, there are conceptual knowledge, and there's a procedural knowledge, and there's a process of meta-learning. What is conceptual knowledge is we are not just learning fragments of facts. You put a collection of facts into a complex concepts, and the concept of patient-centeredness, concept of following a process or things like that. So you need to sort of think about it more deeper. And this is a process of procedural skill, and you adapt to a procedure. It's not just one thing that you learn the entire procedure. And the meta-learning is more important, where you need to reflect about your process of learning as well as how others are learning, so that you become a lifelong learner. And the communication skills deserve that type of attention, where you need to be a lifelong learner in the process of reflecting and learning. So try to be a lifelong learner. Think beyond just factual knowledge. Think of conceptual, procedural and meta-learning. Yet another important concept, or rather a model that is discussed by educationists, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we should understand, we as human beings, we have all sorts of needs in our life, and the society provides that. And most of these physiological safety, love and belonging are provided by the society to us. And it's a matter of society engagement. Society take it as a responsibility to provide you with physiological safety need and love and belonging. But then beyond that, society alone can't offer these needs, like your self-esteem needs, your self-actualization become very important. For that, you need to actively engage in the process of learning. I'm not going to go into details of what are the physiological needs. You just stop this and read it. And I like to take a little time to go beyond that. Now, what is self-actualization is where you recognize yourself, you understand yourself, you develop your morality, your creativity, your spontaneity, your capacity in problem solving. You develop to a stage where there's no prejudice and acceptance of facts. And you try to get rid of your biases, and you self-actualize as a citizen in this society. Now that is important. In fact, on the top you can see what is called transcendence, where what it says is that we in the process of self-actualization, you develop some degree of attachment to your philosophy, your ideas, your perception, and your capabilities and your role in the society. There's some attachment, and those desires are difficult to get rid of. So transcendence is where you are excelling or surpassing or going beyond the usual limits created by the desires, where you do not feel you are not trying to compete others. There's no competition, and not threatened by others, and enjoy the bliss of life. I think that is the most important achievement that we should try and target at. So that is very important. That is why I'm here. I'm talking about it, that we try to achieve a status where we do not fight each other. Own agayana anun parayana manasa hikmuna. We have inherent nature of defeating others. So we need to control that. Anun parayana manasa hikmuna. Anyahapatra kapana. You are committed for the benefit of the others. You understand yourself, self-actualize. Tama honda hati handunana. Anun jaya dekatutuvana. You are happy to see others are progressing, others are developing. And then bandimin torani ramasa priti is you have a joy, you enjoy the progress of yourself and the world, but then you don't have any attachment to that. So that's very important status if you can achieve that. So that's the end of this lecture. I hope that we have created a sort of mindset for you to continue the rest of the lectures to learn communication skills. Thank you.